everybody. Welcome to Off the Lot. I'm Ken Kabatoff.
And I'm Anthony Epp, and we're here to take a deep dive into the world of independent filmmaking and really get into the nuts and bolts of how to make movies on your own terms.
With the Hollywood landscape changing so quickly, now is the time to become your own gatekeeper, and with this podcast, we'll explore exactly what that looks like. So be sure to like, follow, or subscribe, and if you really like something you hear, share it with your friends. So let's dive in. Anthony, how are you? How has this last week been for you?
I am doing great. The last week has been very busy. I'm production managing a vertical web series. So we are right deep into
So this
prep.
is like a Quibi, not Quibi, but a vertical
what
show.
Quibi used to be.
What Quibi used to be. The intention of Quibi has remained.
Yeah. The intention of Quibi has remained. It was maybe about 3 or 4 years too early, I think. And these things have just taken off, especially in Asia. And they are now producing them quite prolifically here in Vancouver, and it's a bit of a wild west. Like there's the team that I'm on right now. We're trying to establish a bit of a system and a framework to make these efficiently, and also to make them at budget levels that can be sustainable, but also with a crew atmosphere and a cast atmosphere that is inviting, safe, and enjoyable for everyone. Again, because the budgets are so lean, there's a lot that people try to squeeze in.
Right.
And so that's what's been going on in the last week, and also just finishing up the telefilm application for The Quiet Canadians, which is exciting. I'm sure you will. I know you're going through it with your film as well.
Yeah. How's the application coming along?
Well, it's been good. It's like a lot of things. We applied for telefilm a few years ago for 13 Miles, and as we'll see with our interview today, we also got rejected from telefilm for our film, but the application process has changed, the adjudication has changed, so there's a lot of new documents to maneuver, and so basically crafting those documents, I think, has been quite a lot more work than we thought it would be.
Yeah.
But we've got them all done. We've got our, as you know, the finance plan, budget, all those fun things are all kind of stacked together and figured out. And now it's just a matter of giving it to them in a format that they want to look at, and then crossing our fingers.
Yeah, no, that's great, and best of luck to you. And
And to you.
I'm sure there are a lot of filmmakers, well, tons of them in Canada that are applying for this telefilm production program. The thing about all the documents and stuff like that, like I look at it like, even though the odds are kind of stacked against you for the most part because of the volume of submissions and just how much money telefilm has, it's still a really good exercise in getting these documents done, because you need all of that information anyway. If you're going out to private investors, to banks, talking to distributors, all of that, you still have to figure out what your self-distribution plan is, if that's how you're going to do it, or what your director's vision is. So none of it really is a waste of time, but I'm not at least putting all my eggs in the telefilm basket, because I don't know, the type of movie that we're putting forward, I don't know if telefilm normally funds these types of things. I hope that every year is different, and, it just comes down to a good story, but you have to have another game plan as well.
It forces you to think of your film as a holistic product, not just as, okay, I just want to get the money to make the film and I'll figure out the rest later.
Yeah.
Like the one thing with telefilm, and I think this might be more now than it has been in the past, is that a lot of the questions and forms you're filling out are making you think forward. What are we going to do with this once it's finished? How are we actually going to get people to hear about it? I agree with you 100%. It's important to think about that now and to hone in what your message is and hone in what your plan is. The plan we have for the marketing that we've developed for telefilm, I mean, when we were going through it, if we accomplish half of what we are hoping to accomplish in terms of the marketing, we think it'll be a huge success, because we listed out, it forced us to come up with a whole bunch of ideas of how we plan to get this out to the marketplace and how we get eyeballs on it, aside from just let's get it into a film festival.
Yeah.
Which is always our default, right? Oh, we'll get it into. I'm sure that you and I were both trained on that concept of we'll just get it into a film festival and suddenly everybody will care.
Yeah, exactly. And then, get into a film festival, Netflix buys it for $10 million, and then you just go and keep making movies. That's how it works, right?
That's exactly how it works. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
In the Disney fantasy dream version of this is exactly how life works.
Best of luck, and to any other filmmakers out there, good luck. I guess we'll find out in roughly 3 months ish.
Roughly 3 months. Well, you know what I will say, just to add on to it though, is Ken, knowing that you've done your telefilm application, and you and I have talked about how we're going through and little pieces of putting together the project. Like, I'm not involved in your project in any kind of formal sense, but I have confidence in you and your filmmaking team's ability to make your film, just based on the conversations we've had about your telefilm application. And so that alone is a good asset, if you will, a sales pitch, because I know that you've got your you've got your shit together. Basically,
Yeah.
I know that your team's got a plan and got an idea of how this can be achieved, and that I think is a confidence booster when talking to people who have the resources to help you make it happen, because you're not walking in there with a pipe dream filmmaker hoping that everything just works out for you. You're walking in there with no, this is how we are going to make our own luck. This is how we're going to make it happen.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And yeah, you really do have to have all of your bases covered when you do these things, right? Because again, like no plan survives contact with the battlefield, but that's why you need to still have a plan so that you just know what you're doing and how to make this work. And actually, I think that that's sort of a really good segue into our main topic today, because that's what ultimately Laura Adkin had to do, who is this fantastic first-time writer-director. We sat down with Laura to talk to her about her Canadian indie feature film Reuniting, which was released in 2023. It's a heartfelt and beautifully crafted drama about old friends reuniting 25 years after college, working through unresolved conflicts, and rediscovering why they became friends in the first place. It's one of those movies that'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, and everything in between. And it also touches on the common thread of our podcast so far, which is, of course, writing to your resources.
Yeah, this was a really fun discussion. Laura first made a name for herself in front of the camera as an actor, so it was really great to sit down with her and talk about tackling her first feature film as a writer director, and to hear when she fully believed that she was capable of doing something like this, and what drove her towards becoming a director and towards making a film just like this. So, from development to casting to production on Bowen Island and distribution in Canada and the United States, we really just dug into what it took to get this movie off the ground. So, if you've ever wondered how to pull off an emotionally resonant, independent film, get it in front of audiences, and make a splash as a first time filmmaker, then this is the episode you want to listen to. So, we hope you enjoy our discussion with Laura Adkin.
Laura, thank you so much for joining us. We really
Thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
Yeah, we love your movie Reuniting. It's
No,
it's
thank you.
fantastic. I also went in. I didn't know too much about it. I knew when it came out a couple of years ago in 2023, and so I knew like it had a bunch of Vancouver locals, and it was Canadian made, and your directorial debut. And I didn't know too much more about it, and so I was on this journey, and it was funny and dramatic and heartwarming and heartbreaking and just like I had no idea where it was going to go. So I loved it. It was really really just a great film.
Oh,
And
thank you.
no, and I guess we're just curious about how did you get started in film? Let's go like all the way back. Tell
All
us.
the way
Yeah,
back.
did you always want to do
When I
this?
was 3 years old. No, actually, when I was 3, I did my first play, and I just remember being like, "This is amazing. I love this." The lights were on me, everyone was looking at me, it was great. So I caught the acting bug very early, and I did that. I went to performing arts high school, and I went down to LA and I went to Stella Adler, and I just wanted to be an actor. That's what I wanted to do. And while I was doing that, I started to write in order to write characters that I wanted to play. And eventually I just kept writing and then I made something. I made a short film that I wrote, produced, and starred in, and My friend Lisa Oviez directed it, and I was like, "Oh, I kinda like making movies," but I didn't have the creative control because I wasn't the director, and so it was a great experience, but I was like, "Maybe I wanna try directing." I don't know, but I was really, really scared. I was really nervous, so it took a while for me to want to dive into doing that, so I produced a bunch of other stuff. I just kind of learned. I went on films and watched, and I read books, and I watched movies, and then oh, Anthony, when was it? I think 2014, I made my first short, called
2015.
2015, right.
Yeah.
Um, I made my first short, The Goodnight Kiss, and yeah, that was kind of it. The second I called action, I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
oh, this is what I wanna do. This is what everything has sort of led me to, my acting career, right, like, everything led me to being a director, and so that was kind of it, so it's 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, and full caveat, I was, Laura's assistant director on
Mhm.
that short film.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Okay, so you 2 go way back. Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you say your acting chops kind of prepared you for directing?
Yeah, I think it really, really is what led me to this. I don't know if I would have ever found directing if it wasn't for acting. Um, I think just understanding story and character and learning how to talk to actors and just understanding that part of it, I think is what sort of led me to being a director. And it's so funny. I found this thing that I made. I think it was in grade 4, and it's just like it's like all about me thing. And I put, my favorite TV show is Law and Order. Like, what a weirdo. This 10-year-old's favorite show is Law and Order. And like my favorite food is McDonald's. And but it also said, and this was like quite shocking to me, said that I wanted to be an actor, but then it said I also want to be a director. Which I had no idea that I had even thought about that back then. But I think one of the things is all of the years of me being on set and working, I never saw a female director ever.
Yeah.
Never worked with one. It wasn't even really a thing that I thought I could do because I never saw it. Then it was when Catherine Bigelow won for The Hurt Locker that I was like, oh, a woman can be a director and you can make a movie that's not like a typical chick flick or whatever. Like you could make a really good Academy Award winning movie and be a director and be a woman. And that's the moment that I was like, oh, maybe that's something I could do.
Wow, that's amazing. And so your first short film, what was it? Why that story? What drew you to it?
Well, it was very ambitious. It was like 22 scenes and like 20 hair, makeup, wardrobe changes for our 2 leads, and we shot it in 4 days. Like, it was insane. I don't know how we did it. It just started as an idea. Like, it's really asks the question, if you knew how a relationship would end, would you start it in the first place?
Cool.
And, that's just sort of where I was in my life. I was in like, a brand new relationship with my husband, at the time. We actually we actually broke up, and then we had to make the movie anyway, and then we got back together, and now we're married. But it was yeah, so I was sort of in that new relationship phase when I was writing it, and that's sort of like what I wanted to write about at the time. And all my stories have like a little bit of darkness to them, a little dark twist. I like death in my
Well,
movies.
yeah, that's clear from reuniting. Okay. Yeah. Spoiler alert. So
Spoiler.
that's interesting. And looking at your IMDb, you have made a number of short films. How many short films now total before your first feature?
Like maybe 5 or 6. I mean, look, some of them are like, this is a 72-hour film thing. I made 2 shorts that were really, like, good.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Where we really, like, took it seriously and had a big crew and, like and made so I did 2 of those, and then I did a bunch of other little things to sort of learn and practice and stuff like that. And then I felt like it was time to do a feature.
So, okay, well, let's talk about that. So, reuniting, what was the kernel of that? How did that come about? Like, we just want to talk about the development process. Take us
Right.
through how this all came to be.
So back in, I want to say 2013, I was at the Toronto Film Festival and I saw the 25th anniversary film retrospective of The Big Chill. And I had seen it before and I really liked it, but seeing it in the theater and almost the entire cast was there, the director was there, like everyone was there. And I was watching this movie and I thought to myself, like, why don't we make movies like this anymore? Why don't we have these ensembles with these people dealing with stuff through sort of witty, irreverent dialogue? And that kind of kernel sort of stuck in my head. And I had an idea, but I don't think at that point in my life I was ready to write the story. And so years later, I think it was in 2019, I was down in LA having coffee with my friend Todd Berger, who's like an incredible writer. And I was like, I need to make a film. I don't know what to do. What should I do? And he's like, well, think backwards. Like, think about what you have access to and go from there and make something that you can like write specifically something that you know you can shoot. So I thought about it and I was like, okay, what do I have access to? I have access to an incredible talent pool of actors in their sort of like late 40s, early 50s ish. And so I was like, okay, great. I have that. I have access to this like beautiful location. My mom lives on Bone Island. And like, I want to write something that takes place in sort of a contained space, but also has like great production value. And then I remembered this idea that I had. And, for me, the other thing that sort of sparked was at that time, my stepson was about to graduate from high school. And I was just thinking about him and his life and how he, has all these plans and dreams and things that he wanted to do. And I was teaching at the time. I still am teaching. And all my students, come to acting school and they're 18 and they're going to be stars and they're going to do all these things. And they just have so much hope and so much excitement about their future. Then I started thinking, like, how many of these people are actually going to keep doing this?
Mhm.
What's going to happen to them in 20 years? And I started thinking about my own journey of being young and being in theater school and like where I thought my life and my career would go. It's like nowhere where I thought it would be. And that was sort of the spark of that is that, I just turned 40 this year. So I was like I was on my way to 40 and just thinking about choices and the choices I've made and the choices my friends have made. And I just wanted to tell that story because to me, we have multiple coming of ages in our life. And we mostly only focus on the coming of age stories where, we go from childhood to adulthood. But there's many other phases in our lives, especially for women. And so I
Mm.
wanted to deal with all of that and then, giving something to make everybody really think about their own mortality because death
Yeah.
scares me. So,
And you got to write about your fears, right?
yeah,
Well, and
exactly.
and and just, this is what this podcast is about also is, we've talked about it multiple times now, resource filmmaking, and the fact that like that was the first thing that you
Mhm.
did was, okay, what do I have available? I have
Yeah.
access to actors. My mom lives on
Mhm.
Bowen Island, so I'm going to go shoot there and get this amazing, scenery and location
Yeah.
for the movie. It's exactly within the realm of like what we all do as indie filmmakers.
Yeah.
So you had
Yeah.
the story and you wrote this yourself, or did you have a
Yes.
co-writer? Yeah.
No, I wrote it myself, and then, as we all do, we get notes and people help us and make it better, but yeah, no,
Yeah.
this one I just wrote by myself.
And when did you film the movie? Because you said you started in 2019 with the germ of the idea. So what happened from sort of that germ of the idea to to actually getting on set? And
Yeah.
obviously, it wasn't free. So like it
No.
was, you had access to these resources, but you had to put some money together.
Ye-
Money. Yeah, well, I mean, I sat my butt down and I wrote, and I committed to I was like, "I'm gonna write this script," and so I wrote the first draft, and I gave myself 8 weeks to do it. So I wrote my first draft in 8 weeks. Wasn't very good, your first draft is never good, but I got it done, and then I started working on it. Then I, applied to Women in the Director's Chair and got into that, and that was really great. So that happened in end of November, beginning of December of 2019. So that was really helpful to workshop the script. We also went up to Whistler. We took lots of meetings. And that's sort of when that is actually when I connected with Krista, who is my producer. And we were going to apply. well, we did apply, we didn't get it, but we applied to a telefilm talent to watch. And for that, I needed a producer that hadn't produced a feature before. And so I was trying to figure out who that was going to be. Cause like finding the right producer is probably one of the most important things of making a film. You got to find this like a marriage. So of course, just like any marriage, how did it start? With a couple glasses of wine. So I was at I was at a party in Whistler. I was like having my glass of wine, doing my dancing, and I looked over and I saw Krista, and we had known each other for a while, and I knew that she had produced, and I also knew that her kids were just sort of old enough. She'd taken some time off to have her twins, and I think there were 3 or 4 at the time, and I knew she was wanting to get back into working. And so that moment I was like, "Oh my god, I have to go talk to her." And of course, couple glasses of wine, everyone's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then I sent her the script and hoped that she would still want to do it, and she did. So that was sort of like the end of December of 2019 is when we really started like making it happen. And we applied to Telefilm Talent to Watch. We did not get it. We were shortlisted, but we didn't get it. And I think that's the big thing. And this is the advice I would give to all filmmakers. If you don't get telefilm, still make your movie. I think what happens a lot is in Canada, it's a bit of a double-edged sword with our funding sources. It's great because there's money available, but if you don't get it, a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, I guess I can't make my movie now."
Right,
And
that's your permission structure, right?
yeah, so we were like, "Okay, what's our next thing?" So our next thing was Telefilm was having their regional funding. So we're like, "Okay, we're gonna apply to this." So our first meeting with Telefilm actually had to happen over not Zoom, what was it before? Skype,
Oh
because
yeah.
it was just at the start of the pandemic. So one of my students at my school, her roommate got COVID. This was in March of 2020. And so I was like, what are we supposed to do? So I thought I had to isolate myself. So we had our first meeting with Telefilm on Skype. We're all like trying to figure it out. And then we applied for Telefilm regional funding, which we also did not get. And then I was like, screw it. Let's just make this anyway. And so we went forward with this idea that we were going to make this movie. And so we worked really hard on getting the scripts where it needed to go and starting to put stuff together. So at this point, it was like May of 2020. And then Krista got into the producer's lab at the Whistler Film Festival. And that was really helpful as well for us to sort of get traction on the script and get ideas and all of that sort of stuff. And then we started putting our cast together, and then we just picked a date. And when we decided when we were going to go to camera, we had no money. We had just decided that like May of 2021, we were shooting because that's when everyone was available. And so then we're like, okay, we need money to do this.
And so
So
in
yeah,
terms of like, so Talent to Watch is $500,000, right?
it was 250 at the time.
Oh, right. It was 250, but
Yeah.
it's a maximum. You're, I think, allowed to spend a maximum of 500
Yeah,
or budget
something
that.
like that. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
250, and then the regional fund. How much were you applying for that?
I think we wanted to stay under 300 cash because we wanted to utilize the UBCP ACTRA members agreement. So Krista and I are both members of UBCP. And so if you are a member, you can access this agreement, which allows you to pay your actors $200 a day instead of the BCMPA. Even the BCMPA 50% rates is a lot of money. Like your budget has to like go so high to be able to afford these rates sometimes. So yeah, so we're like, okay, we've got to keep it under 300. So that's what we asked for. And then we knew that we were going to have a lot of favors because in kind doesn't count for the agreement. It's just the cash budget.
Yeah.
So we had asked for 300, which really is not a lot of money. And we had thought that we would get it, but we did not. And it's when I got the notes back, I was like, oh, this person just doesn't like the story. Like, and that's the thing, right? It was very, very clear that I think we had 2 people read it. I'm not really it's different now. They do it in like, they have like a group setting now where they like debate it and stuff. But this was like they just had like 2 people read it. And the notes, I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay, this person just didn't like my story."
They were just
And
having
there's
a really bad day maybe too. Like, you it's so
yeah.
subjective, right? You don't know.
It's so subjective, and that's what's so important for people to realize is yeah, and the notes were I just didn't l re there was a couple notes, I'm not gonna lie, there was a couple notes that were good, but a lot of them were just taste,
Yeah.
and not everybody likes everything, so you don't know who your reader is gonna be, you don't know who's gonna so all these people making decisions, so that was a bit of a bummer, but then I'm like, "Okay, great, let's take an American approach to this," and I think that is a really important thing for filmmakers to do is think like an American. And an
Mhm.
American just goes and asks for what they want and they don't apologize about it. And so I was like, "Okay, who do I know that has money?" And then I just started asking. And my pitch was this: film is a terrible investment. You will never get your money back. Would you like to write me a check? And every single person did.
Perfect.
I
And
love it.
it was mostly women. Almost all of our investors were women who are entrepreneurs, who run their own business, who really wanted to support Krista and I telling the story, but also doing something. So I think it's really important to find people that want to support you. And especially with indie film, like you're not going to make your money back. It's just is not going to happen. If you do, that's amazing for you. Even us, we have distribution, but the amount of money you have to put out to get it, like it's just
Yeah.
don't tell people they're gonna make money back because it's just not a thing.
It's not even like the money is always the thing that because when you think of it, this is an investment, and that's probably the word that you're throwing at people. You're saying
Yeah,
investment, and people think, well, if I'm investing in something, it
yeah,
should there should be some level of financial benefit to that.
yeah,
But it's really more like if you were to go to the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra, if you were to go
yeah,
to the opera or something like that, they're not asking you for an investment. They're
yeah,
asking for something else, and what you're getting out of it is something else. You're
yeah,
putting a name on a seat. I mean, what's a name
yeah.
on a seat, right?
Well, even
And
art, right? Like
art.
people who and, most of us who are indie filmmakers, we are not rolling in the dough. We're all smart enough to probably have, like, corporate jobs, but we've chosen the life in the arts, and so, maybe some people, but I'm definitely not rolling in cash, but some
No.
people
No,
are,
me neither.
and some people that have a lot of money like to spend their money on things that they enjoy. And a lot of people like to invest in the arts because they appreciate art. So one of the most fun things to do was do screenings with our investors. One of our biggest investors is from Grand Prairie. So we got theatrical release in Grand Prairie. I brought the step and repeat. I put it the step and repeat and I bought a red carpet and I put it in my husband's golf bag and I dragged it to Grand Prairie and I set it up myself and we got a photographer and they got to experience all of their friends coming and having this red carpet and then going to see the movie and then a Q&A after and then we had a little reception at their house afterwards and like for them that was like a great experience.
And that's an amazing thing, and that's a lifelong experience too. Like very few people get to be filmmakers. Nobody knows that we're all basically looking at our credit card statements every month and trying to figure out how we
Yes.
can manage it. But the privilege of being able to make a movie or to be able to be in that kind of world is one thing. But then also to be able to just participate in the world because that's one of those like I dream of being an astronaut type things when you're a
Right.
kid. You never really you always every kid like grows up entertaining the idea at one point that they're going to be in a Star Wars movie or something like that. And this is an opportunity to just to participate in that process and to know that
Yeah.
you were a movie mogul for a fleeting moment in
Yeah.
time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to a potential investor recently, and he was like, "I don't need more money. I have
Yeah.
money." Like, and I'm like, "Yeah, well, so what I'm offering you is a chance to be on a red carpet and be at a film premiere because you have never made a movie before." And that really
Yeah.
excited him. And he's like, "Is Scarlett
Yeah.
Johansson going to be there?" And I'm like, "No."
No.
But but it'll be a great experience, and you'll see your name on the screen just like when you saw as a kid your favorite movies,
Yeah.
and so you're offering them something that they just wouldn't have otherwise had. Because money, if these people are willing to write a check for 50, 100, or two hundred thousand
Yeah.
dollars, they probably don't need much more money right now. So
Yeah, and so I think finding the right people, making sure you're really, like, clear with your pitch and letting them know what they're making, like, what you're making, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and, like, I think, you'll find the right people, and Anthony, you're saying about credit cards, and yeah, like, I put money into my film, everybody told me not to, but what are you gonna do, right? You're gonna
Mhm.
stop production because, you need something else? No, I was like, "Here's my credit card, go take it, figure it out." It was hard and, we still haven't quite made that money back, but it's, even my husband who was in the film is like, "This is an investment, it's an investment in your career," and I think the important thing for anyone who wants to make film or be in this industry or whatever is the investment in yourself. No one is going to invest in you the way that you will. And so whether that's financial or time or whatever, but like the people that are successful are the people that take the big leaps and just do it.
Well said. So let's talk about doing it.
Okay.
You have the money, or well, you didn't have the money, but you got enough
But then we
basically to
got
get started,
we
right?
we got enough to get started. We did get telefilm in the end. We got telefilm for post-production,
Great.
which like it was easy for them because we made the film already.
Because the movie's done. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was great because we also didn't get any notes because it was already made.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to we really could make the film that we wanted to make. So we did the thing that you really shouldn't do, which is we had enough to make the movie. We didn't have all the money for post yet. I really highly recommend you have your money for post before you start making your film, but what are you gonna do? So luckily we got it in the end.
If it's between that and not making the movie, then, still what you
Yeah,
did was great, right? Make the movie, get
yeah.
it in the can, and then, figure it
And then
out.
figure it
But
out from there.
so how was pre-production? How long did you give yourself for pre-production and for the casting process? Did you already have the
Right.
actors in mind when you wrote it because you have
We
access?
yeah, so most of them, right? So, David, who plays Danny, is my husband, so that was easy.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I wrote that specifically for him. The character of Rachel, played by Michelle Harrison, and the character of Carrie, played by Bronwyn Smith, both of them, I knew ahead of time that I wanted Michelle was the first person in my head. I've always wanted to work with Michelle. I've known her for over 20 years, and she was the first person that I knew I wanted to be in this film. So I told her about it. Then she kept being like, "Can I read the script? Can I read the script?" And then I was really nervous to share the script, so it took like a really long time for me to give it to her. Was so nervous that she'd be like, "This is terrible," but she didn't. She's like, "Yeah, I want to do this." And same with Bronwyn. Bronwyn and I worked together at an acting school, and I saw her in a play, and I was like, she blew my mind, and I was like, "This woman, how is she not the lead of a television series?" So I told her, I'm like, "I'm writing a part for you." And she's like, "Great, keep writing." The role of, Colin, played by Roger Cross, I didn't really know Roger. We had met a couple times, and I knew he was friends with Michelle, but he was the only person I ever had in my head for it. So that was quite nerve-wracking just because I didn't know him, so Michelle put us in touch, and he read the script and loved it, and I was like, "Yes." I knew I wanted, a name for Michael, Rachel's husband. I wrote the role to be a little bit smaller so that it could be shot really quickly, so, like, it would be easier to get a name. Jesse was not anyone that I had in my mind because I just why would he want to be in my movie? Like, it never even occurred to me until Michelle was like, "What about Jesse Martin?" And I'm like, I'm sorry, Jesse Martin from the original Broadway cast of Rent and Law and Order, my favorite show when I was 10." And she's like, "Yeah, because they were working together on The Flash." And conveniently, he also lived on Bone Island at the time, so it was a
Amazing.
very easy
Wow.
commute for him. So he read the script and said yes, and I actually didn't meet him in person until the first day of shooting because everything was COVID, right? So
Right.
everything was on Zoom. So and then the role of Natalie, played by Carmen Moore, was actually written for another actor who, like 3 days before we went to camera, got a much bigger role, which totally get it, it's COVID and you have to make money,
Yeah.
and so I totally like, as a person, I was like, "Yes, go do that, that's amazing." As a director and a producer, I was like, "Oh my god," and so I was like, "Okay, we gotta figure this out." We had a casting director who had worked with us on the smaller roles, and, he sent us a list of people, and I knew that I needed to have, like, a woman of color in their sort of, like, mid to late 40s, and one of the really big sort of, like, ahas for me is there's not a lot. There's not a lot of women who have been given the opportunity to be at that level, and so that was a really interesting kind of eye-opening moment for me, and then I thought about, and she was on the list, and I thought about Carmen. So Carmen, who's so good in this film. They're all so good in this film, but
They are.
Carmen
It's spectacular.
Carmen was in my first short. I don't know if you remember Anthony, but
Hmm.
she was in my first short, and she's just a great person. And I called her up and I was like, "Hey, so I'm making this feature film. You want to be in it?" And she's like, "Send me the script." I'm like, "Cool. We go to camera in 3 days, and it's one of the lead roles. You good?" And she's like, "What?" So she read it, and I think she said she got like 10 pages into it and called me. She's like, "Yes, I'll do this." So she just like dove right in. I was like, "You're going to wardrobe, go figure this out." And yeah, and then she just kind of showed up. Everyone else had a very long time. They had had the script for a while. They had had revisions of the script. We had lots of conversations about character. They met up with each other. But Carmen just was thrown right into it, and she did a fabulous job. I mean, she won the Leo Award for Best Supporting Actor. She was nominated for a UBCP ACTRA award as well. So, and then for the other roles, we used a casting director and had auditions and did all of that. Honestly, pre-production was a bit of a blur. It was right in the middle of COVID, so everything was on Zoom. Everything is masks central. That was probably one of the most stressful parts of making the film, honestly, was like COVID protocols. Would we be able to shoot? What was gonna happen, and so figuring all of that out, we were shooting on Bowen Island, so figuring out the logistics of that. We couldn't put everybody up on the island, there just wasn't space for everybody or money, so figuring out transportation, so we got, like, a transport person, we rented, like, a little mini bus, and so we had a parking lot, so all of the crew drove to the parking lot, and then they got on the bus, and then the bus driver took them to the ferry, and then they got on the ferry, and then yeah, so it was just like
Wow.
organizing all of that, and then figuring out like our camera days within the travel time as well. Honestly though, like everyone was freaking out because it was a ferry, but it is faster to go from Vancouver to Bowen Island than it is to go Vancouver to like Abbotsford or Langley or Mission if there's traffic.
Oh,
So
totally.
it's
It's like
actually
a 25-minute ferry, right?
it's 15 minutes
15
actually.
minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, and getting from, downtown Vancouver, as long as the bridges aren't insane, it really wasn't. So I think everyone just needed to kinda do it one time, because in
Mhm.
everyone's brain, I think ferry meant like 2 hours or something like that. So then once everyone kind of realized it was pretty quick to get over, then it was great. And then, yeah, putting the team together was a big part of it as well. So Sterling Bancroft was my, cinematographer. Him and I have worked together for 10 years. He did my first short, and pretty much everything I've done, I've worked with Sterling on. So then, him putting his team together, I just kind of trusted him to do that. And everybody else, Krista and I met with, and we had Krista and I had a couple agreements that I think are really important for any sort of like filmmaker producer relationship. Our first rule is we were not allowed to have freakouts or mental breakdowns on the same day. Like we
Fair.
couldn't. If one person was having a freak out, the other person could not. And it
Yeah,
worked out really well.
dibs.
Yeah, it's like I have dibs on a cry right now. And so that was really important. And then the other thing was the veto power of anyone that we didn't feel right about as far as crew or anybody, right? Is we wanted, and no questions about it. If one of us just had a feeling that someone wasn't going to be the right fit, great. Let's move on and find someone else. Because of that, we had such a fabulous crew. Like our crew was phenomenal, and
Mhm.
everyone worked so hard, and so I'm so grateful for
How
our crew.
large was your crew?
It's like, I don't know, like a lot. It felt like a lot of people. I
Like
don't
more
know,
than
like
more than 20?
yeah, yeah. Probably
Okay.
had like 50 people on set.
Holy
maybe.
cow. Wow. In that
So, I mean,
house.
we had so many actors, right, as well, so maybe
Right, right.
maybe, like,
Yeah.
sort of 50 people with that because we only had 1 camera. We talked about having 2 cameras, but we had 1 camera, and then we had a grip and lighting swing team,
Mhm.
and then, hair and make we had a few hair and makeups because we had so many, so many actors, and we had an intimacy coordinator who was amazing and awesome, and every filmmaker should, use an intimacy coordinator. I cannot stress
Absolutely.
that enough. Even if you think you don't have anything that requires one, everyone should have an intimacy coordinator break down your script because there's a lot of things that she flagged that I would have never flagged. It was also very helpful because our intimacy coordinator was amazing and like half the time she doubled as our second AD. But that's not normally what happens, but that's just what happened in our
That's
case.
what happens in this.
Yeah, my mom was craft service. Like this is what happened.
I love it. I love it. And I saw also you had Alex Shamku as your sound on-set sound recordist. Alex is amazing. He just did my latest film and phenomenal.
So, Alex Shamku, I have known since I did a web series that I was an actor in called Hitman 101. And that was his first job as well. And we have worked together ever since. I have never worked with another sound recordist.
Yeah.
And Alex does not do features. He
Mhm.
does
Well, he
not.
did and he did ours too.
Yeah, exactly, right, he doesn't do features very often. I actually didn't really give him a choice, I just told him he was doing it and when the dates were, and he was like, "Okay." He is
Amazing.
so good, and that's another thing, like, having someone really good for sound is so crucial because like, you don't have the money in indie film to do all the like, we did some ADR, but you just don't have the money to do it or the time, and honestly, I think in TV especially, we get very lazy, and
Yeah.
it's just like, "Fix it in post, fix it in post, fix it in post," whereas, we really made sure we had the sound on the day, to the point where when we were doing our pickup days, we had the first AD from The Flash, and he was like, "What is with this sound guy? Why are we even needing to go again?" And I was like, "Because it's indie film and we can't afford to fix it. So he's
Mhm.
fixing it now." And he's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, on my film, we didn't have power at the location that we were shooting at in this farm, and
Mm,
Alex was our on-set sound mixer, and we had like 7 generators, little mini Jennies running around everywhere, so you can just hear this like hum. But he was so good at tuning it out, and we didn't have to ADR a single line for the movie. I was like,
amazing.
thank you so much, Alex, because I hate ADR. It never sounds good,
Me too.
and it's a waste of time and money, and it's just get it right on the day. And so Alex, if you're listening, thank you. How many shoot days did you have overall then?
Krista is gonna listen to this and be like, "That's wrong, Laura." But I think we shot like 16 and then 5. So we had always planned to shoot the majority of it on Bowen Island in May. And then we had some Vancouver dates and we had to do them sort of like around schedules. So we knew we were going to do it in September. And that was actually the most brilliant, happy accident because that was already budgeted, it was already planned. We were able to get a cut of the film together, like an assembly together before we did our shooting of the last 5 days, and there was things that we needed that were missing. There was one scene that just wasn't working, it just was not working, and it not the actors, it was 100% my dialogue. It just wasn't good enough, and so I was like, "I need to rewrite this scene, and we need to reshoot this scene." And so we were able to it's the scene of the 2 girls on the mountain,
Oh,
and what's
sure. Yeah.
crazy
Mm.
is so the shot behind them where you sort of see everything, and then when we go into coverage, 2 totally separate locations. Totally separate
Oh,
locations.
hilarious.
Can't
Um,
tell. Can't tell at
ca
all.
like, this is Sterling being so amazing and figuring out, like, one is on this cliff, like, in this area where there's, like, no people, there's nothing, it's, like, beautiful, and then when we can't come in for the coverage, we shot it on, Labor Day long weekend, right by one of the most popular beaches that was filled with screaming children, and a car alarm going off and, like, all of these things, and if you really look so now if anyone hasn't seen the movie, if you really look, you can see the leaves have started to change. because we are moving into fall. But we were able to sort of redo that, which was great. I added a scene that I felt like there was a moment missing between two characters. So I wrote an extra scene. And then we were able to get some B roll that we didn't have before. That's something I really was not. My editor was like, "Where's all your B roll?" I was like, "What?" She was like, "'Cause I only make shorts. So you got no time for transitional B-roll in short films." And I was like, "Oh, crap. Yeah, we need that, don't we?" So we were able to shoot all of that, including all the sailboat stuff. So the sailboat stuff was great because we just sort of hung out in one location at one of the houses that we shot at all day, and we just, like, shot the sailboat at different times of the day. But while that was happening is when the whales showed up, and I was like,
Mm.
"Sterling, turn the camera!" And he's like, "I got the wrong lens." But it was great because the humpback whale that you see in the movie and the little baby humpback whale, that they just appeared and we shot them. So that was like this wonderful production value. Everyone's, "Is that real?" I'm like, "Nope, that's real." Those, and it was the first time in like 20 years humpbacks had been back to that area anyway because of the mine. So it was pretty cool to have that.
Amazing.
No.
As far as your process, so you go from making short films, which again, you know, 2, 3, 4 day shoot, to now
Yeah.
a 16+5 feature. How did you handle that as a director, like tackling such a big story, basically? Like, did you shoot in chronologically for this movie, or how did you sort of manage the flow from scene to scene and just the weight of such a, you know, big project?
I always thought about this like after the fact, but it's actually not that much different. It really isn't. It's just bigger and longer. But, trying to just be like, what are we doing the next day? I think prep and pre production is really important. Making sure you understand the story really, really well so that when you shoot out of order, because that's how we shot as chronologically as possible within the world of making film. So I really thought about the actors as far as like making the schedule. Like very often, I would get the schedule and I'd look at it, I'd be like, no. And I had to like move things around because, Anthony, you know this, but first ADs think about the schedule of like if in a different way sometimes.
Right.
Then, and I really thought about the actors and I thought about what would be best for them as far as like emotional arc and stuff like that and what they would have to do because I know that there was like some days where there's like some heavy emotional stuff and so making sure that you know that fit in what we were doing. So, and but also for us, 10-hour camera days was really important. I really, if I can do anything in our industry, is change the way in which we make movies. I don't think it's necessary to work 16, 17-hour days. I think it's not productive. I think everybody gets tired. I think you actually waste more money. I think if you have a crew and a cast that have a good night's sleep and are properly rested, they will be more productive for you. So we had a couple days that I think we had 2 12-hour camera days, and they were always before a weekend, and, people are more willing to give you a little bit extra if you take care of them earlier. So, I
For
think really
sure.
really thinking about all of that, really making sure that I knew the story. When you're the writer director, I think it's a bit different because, like, you know the story so well for so long that that was easy for me to know where we were. Trying to navigate 6 character arcs is, like, kind of insane for your first film because 'cause you're not only navigating 6 character arcs, you're navigating 6 actors who all need different things. That to me is the number one thing of being a director, is quickly figuring out what each of your actors needs to feel supported and to be able to give their best performance, and every human is different, right? So everyone needs something different. And so you have to figure that out like really quick, like how they like to be directed and what they need and, which actor definitely needs to shoot after lunch because they need to, they're better after they've eaten and, all of those little things that you have to figure out while also trying to manage the story. So it was a lot. The first day was the I'll say this, the first scene that we shot I cut it from the movie because it just like I think it was a little bit I don't know, it took me a second to get into it. And we didn't really need it anyway, but the first scene I shot was with Jesse, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's Jesse Martin." So that took me a second to kind of get out of that, and then I got to know him, and he was, like, so great. But yeah, it was I just kind of I'm, like, good at it. I don't know. So it just kind of all worked, and it really didn't feel different than doing a short, just
Mhm.
longer.
Was there one challenging day or a moment that didn't that where, things were not going the way you had hoped they would do, and or
Yeah.
that they would hope they would go?
Yeah, there was one scene that we were shooting it, and I was just like, "This is not working. This is not working." And so I just stopped everything. I was like, "Okay, we're taking 5 minutes." And I just went off by myself to try and figure it out. I took a, paper towel and I rewrote the scene. And then
Amazing.
I gave the actors the paper. I'm like, "This is what you're saying now." And we changed the structure of the scene and then it worked. And, I think that was the moment where everyone kind of got on board with me, that I knew what I was doing, instead of just like continuing to try to make this thing work that just was clearly not working, to like stop it and like take a second and then figure out a better way to do it, I think is really important. So that, and then, well, something that was absolutely horrible for me was everything in the sailboat. I got so seasick, I wanted to die.
Hmm.
It was like I had to leave the boat. I was like, "I can't be in here." I get really bad motion sickness, and Sterling loves sailboats. Sailboat was his idea. It was supposed to be a treehouse. I wrote it as a treehouse. He's like, "A sailboat." I'm like, "Okay, if you can find one." And then, of course, we found one. Sorry. And so it was really funny because watching the dailies and then watching the cut, I was like, "Oh, that's what happened." No memory of what was going on in the sailboat
Right.
because I was so sick. So I got out of the sailboat and sat on the dock, but the dock was still going like this,
Oh
and
my
I
gosh.
and I couldn't go further away because of the monitor wouldn't go further away. So I had to just like I was like, "Oh," and then I'm like trying to drink ginger ale, and I just so that was like this the scene works amazing, and the actors are great, and everyone, like, Jesse was, like, almost throwing up. Poor Alex Shamku, I thought he was gonna die as well. Sterling's, like, living his best life on the sailboat, everyone else is like, "Oh god." So that was a little bit crazy. I think the thing that was very stressful as well was the scene where they're jumping in the water because we only have 1 take, right? Like,
Right.
we're waiting for the sun to be at the most perfect moment, and then I need all these actors to jump in cold water, and if it doesn't work, we can't do it again because
Yeah.
we can't blow dry everyone's hair. That was funny because Sterling and I were waiting for the sun to be exactly where it needed to be, and all the actors kind of freaking out. They're like, "Should we just go? Like, are we gonna do this? Or David, my husband, was the worst. He was like, are we gonna when are we gonna do this? Is this gonna happen soon?" And I'm like, "Just wait." And then of course it was great. So we practiced it a bunch of times, and then they all jumped in the water. And I actually here's something that I will tell directors. If you want your actors to trust you, if you're gonna make them do something crazy, you should do it first. So I actually jumped in the ocean before. Not on that day, but like before we shot the scene. Michelle and I went down to the dock and we ran and we jumped in the ocean and I filmed it and I sent it to them. I'm like, "Okay, I did this." And then they were all like, "Okay, we'll do it too."
Oh, brilliant. I love that. That's great advice. Let's get into post-production. So you finish shooting.
Yeah.
You've talked a little bit about having time to make that assembly before your pickup shoots, but
Yeah.
how was editing this feature? You said you cut the very first scene that you shot. How long also was your post-production period, even beyond the pickup shoots? Tell us.
A very, very long time. So we got the edit was locked by the end of the year, so by December. My editor, Alex Barker, who again I've worked with on everything I've ever made since my first short, is amazing, and we have a really, really great working relationship. For me, I don't like anybody else in the edit other than me and my editor. I just people can come later, but I don't like other people to be there, like producers and stuff like that. And so, Krista and I had that conversation early on where I'm just like, I need the first couple of sessions just to be the two of us. And she was totally cool with that. And then she, came in later and watched cuts later. And so, yeah, we worked on that quite a bit, and Alex is so funny. She has such great ideas, but she's always like, "Oh, Laura, I have something to tell you." And I'm like, "Oh god." She's like, "You're not gonna like it, but I have a thought. Just hear me out." And she wanted to cut a scene. And this scene was the biggest, most expensive scene that we
Mhm.
shot. It was like so many backgrounds, so many things. It took like we had stuff donated that cost like it was kind of an epic scene. And on the page, it needed to be there. But when we cut the film together, it didn't need to be there anymore. And I think it's one of those things that you really need to listen to someone else when they tell you things because there's things that feel very important to you as a director. And of course I was like, "No. No, you can't cut that." And she's like, "Well, okay." I'm like, "Okay, try it." I'm like, "You're wrong. You are wrong, Alex, but you take it out and I'll watch it and I'm going to tell you that you're wrong." And then I watched it and of course she was right. She was totally
Right.
right. It didn't need to be there, and this is why I think collaboration is so important, and this is why I would never even if I had the skill set to be an editor, I would never edit my own film. I think some of the most brilliant ideas have come from my editor who sees the story in a different way than me, and I think having people who understand your vision and understand the story that you're trying to tell, but can see it in a different way is so important. Like, when I see and, like, no shade, but, like, if I'm watching something that was written, directed, produced, edited, shot, like cinematography all by one person. I'm like, what are you doing? You need someone to tell you those hard truths about something that you think is important. And so cutting that scene was like, oh God. Like, I'm not even kidding. We had a band in the scene. We recorded a song
Oh,
for
wow.
it was it was an epic scene that didn't make any sense in the story we were now telling. So I think if we ever do a Blu-ray, which I think we will do, we'll have it as, like, an additional, like, a special feature so everyone can still watch it because Sterling did such a it's a wonder as well. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I
It's
mean,
just like
you have to,
yeah,
kill your darlings or slaughter your
yeah,
babies or whatever,
Yeah.
yeah,
term you want, but if it doesn't make sense for the story, if it's not serving the story, it
yeah,
has to go, and having that editor, somebody just one step removed from production, right?
yeah.
Because like you know how much it cost and how much time it took to shoot
Yep,
and the effort that went into it. But Alex, your editor's like, well, yeah, but I don't really care. It's not good for the story that we have now. It's not the script.
yeah,
It's not what we were shooting on set. We are now in the editing room, and this is the story that we have. So we have to make
yeah.
this as good as possible. I love
And
that.
she sold me on it by reminding me that in The Big Chill, Kevin Costner's character was supposed to appear in a flashback scene. And that was like this big scene that the director thought was super, super important. And they cut it because it made more sense to never see him. You use a big chill on me. All right.
Isn't it that it's an interesting commentary on being a director, though? It's sort of taking that idea that now it's no longer like your own, for lack of a better saying it, your own ego of like,
Hmm.
but we worked so hard on this and I
Yeah.
poured my heart and soul into this and this is so important to me,
Hmm.
and releasing that moment and finally saying, no, the movie needs this.
Yeah.
It needs to be better than my vision. And
Yeah.
it deserves that lesson. It's sort of a
Yeah.
very interesting transition.
Yeah, and, and Alex reminded me of this as well when we started the edit, and she'll probably remind me every time we make a movie is there's the film in your head and the film in your hand. And once you get to the edit, you have what you have. And whatever idea you had before, you have to like let it go and be open to whatever story you're now telling. So you hope that it gets better, right? Like that's the idea is that the film keeps getting better. So yeah, so that the edit went on for a while, back and forth, obviously. We're just trying to get money from telefilms so we could pay people. So we had some really great music supervisors. The music was a big part. I knew music needed to be a big part of this film. I really wanted an epic, well-known 90s song to open the film because I needed everyone to buy into my movie. When you
Mhm.
have an indie film, sometimes people are like, "Oh, it's an indie film." But like if you open your movie with a song that everyone recognizes, it immediately allows everyone to go like, "Oh, this is a real movie."
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, we opened the film with Montel Jordan's "This Is How We Do It." So that was very expensive, but our music supervisors worked really hard to get that. The other thing is Alex is so good at picking music for temp tracks that I'm like, "Damn it, woman, now we need to get this." So, "Right Here, Right Now," which is the song that ends it, is was in the 10th track that she did, and it just we had to get it. So we got that one, and then we found a mix of indie artists and Canadian artists and then well-known songs. We had Tell Bachman's "She's So High" for the jumping scene. We had that for our festival run, but then the cost everything else we had for the whole thing, but the cost for that for then when we went and did our theatrical was way more than we thought it was gonna be. So our amazing, we had a composer, so Red was our composer, and she was great, and she wrote some songs for the film and did all the music and everything, and then Brandon was our music editor, and then he actually wrote a song for that sequence. So, like, just working with all of these amazing humans was just, like was so great. So doing we did you have to do your post sound, and then you have to do some VFX stuff because I fully left my Starbucks mug in a shot, I'm not even kidding you. When we were watching it, I was like, "Oh my god."
Before it was cool.
Before it was cool. I was like, "Oh my god." So we had to that out of there, and then Dave Chick did our sound,
Oh,
and
great.
he
Yeah.
yeah, so he had done sound on some of our other stuff as well, so working with him, we had to do a little bit of ADR, and then our color actually took, like, a year, which sounds insane. So Dermot works with Sterling, and Dermot was working with this company called Barco, and Barco is develops, like, laser I don't wanna, like I'm gonna mess this up so bad, they're gonna be like, "What are you talking about?" But they do, like, lasers or something, and they one of the things that they create is these new projectors, and these projectors are unreal, and so we got to go to their test facility, and they were actually using our film as, like, to test out how to color for these projectors. So the
Hmm.
technology kept changing, so our film color had to keep changing. So it was like we had to kind of, like, do it a few times. Color doesn't normally take a year to do, just
No.
in case any filmmakers are like, "Whoa, that's crazy." But you can do things, fast, cheap, or what's the other what are the things?
Fast, cheap,
Fast,
or
Or
good.
cheap, or good.
yeah, you need to figure out which of those 2 you want, and the inexpensive and good is wins most of the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that took a while, and then obviously we kinda didn't have money, we had to wait for Telefilm to come in. And then it just gets very annoying at that point where you're just like, "Okay, well, now it's done, but now we have to wait for the festival run, and now we have to plan." So it was probably done at the beginning of 2023. It was all done and ready to go, and we had all the licensing agreements for the oh my god, the stuff you have to do with music is insane. It's
Yeah.
insane. I had no idea the amount of things that you need to figure out for music license and rights. Good grief. That was like,
And
Yeah.
all the 20 people you have to talk to.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
because like this person owns the track, but person owns the thing, and then they're
Yeah.
different places, and then they don't talk to each other. And oh my God,
Yeah,
that
and that rights were sold to this company 10 years ago, so
oh my
you have to talk to
God.
them. Yeah.
And one of the songs we were looking at had samples in it. So then each
Oh,
sample and we're like, "Nope, that's crazy," because then you have to, like, license it from each oh my gosh. So, like, music supervisors, I was like, "Why do we need a music supervisor?" And, like, yeah, you do. You need someone to deal with that. And they did a great job. They were just out of school, so they were, like, really excited, and now they're both working a ton in the industry. And so then we just, like, did the festival run where we sort of plotted it out, and I'm not gonna lie, like, our festival run was super disappointing to me. I really thought we would get into more places. Yeah, it was kind of a bummer.
How did
We
you approach
premiere
it? Did you say, "Okay, we're gonna go to the top tier," like, try to get into TIFF and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
What was that
and
like?
and TIFF was really disappointing as well because that was the year that very unfortunately, their film programmer, passed away. And
Mm,
so very suddenly, and he was such a like a champion of film and just a champion of filmmakers, and he did their Canadian programming, and he just was really Like, we had so many conversations with him over email about, our film, and Krista and I really trying to make sure that people knew who we were and all of that. And so that threw kind of everything into turmoil, right? Because people were dealing with the loss of a colleague, and then but also trying to fill the position. And so all of this stuff was happening, and we really hoped that they would come out, because in the past, TIFF programmers had come out to Vancouver to watch the films that were made by filmmakers out here. And they didn't do that. And it feels really, anyone that's a West Coast filmmaker totally understands the isolation from the Canadian industry. Like, we are looked at as like the stepchild that's over in the corner, and them not coming out was a really big bummer. It's not saying that we would have gotten in, whatever, but just to not even have anyone come out. Like, I realized really quickly that our film is not really a festival film, and I think, and when I kind of understood that, I was like, "Oh, okay, this is okay." And being someone who screens for films as well, like, if you just watch the first 20 minutes of the film, it's just like, "Oh, this is a nice film." There's nothing, it's just what it is. You have to watch the whole film. And I know that a lot of people that screen for films don't watch the whole film. And so I realized that, and I was like, okay. So we did premiere at my absolute favorite film festival, which is the Austin Film Festival. And this is a festival that has supported my entire career. So two of my shorts have been in competition. So not only have they played at the festival, but they've been in the top 10 of the festivals. I've written and had scripts in their competition. I screened for them, and it was really special to have my first feature premiere there. It was really the
Yeah, and it's huge.
perfect thing.
That's a great festival.
Such a good festival. Anyone that's a writer, oh my gosh, go to the Austin Film Festival. It's so supportive. It's so great. Like, the conference is amazing. But I think what I learned there, and hopefully this is helpful to other filmmakers, is it's less about like, oh, let's get into this big film festival. And it's like, find festivals that support you and will continue to support you, because those are the people that you can go directly to the programmers. Like, that's what I did. I went directly to Barbara. I'm like, hi. So Barbara runs the festival, and I'm like, can you watch my film? And she's like, absolutely. So finding the festivals that have supported you, because it's really, really hard. It's really hard to make a film and just put it out there and have people watch it. We got the most amazing rejection letter from Sundance. It was great. It was, like, very personal from one of the programmers being like, "I loved your film. It doesn't fit in our program, but these are the reasons why I liked it. Please let me know what you're doing with your career, et cetera, et cetera." So, it was so funny to
Not a
get
lot of
that, because
filmmakers would get that. I mean, the
Yeah.
no.
amount of submissions that Sundance
Yeah,
gets.
right? Like, it was awesome, and I said to Kristen, I'm like, "This is so weird because 'cause I'm so happy, but we
Yeah.
didn't get in."
Best no ever.
Yeah, it was the best rejection ever. So we played the Austin Film Festival, and then we played, the Whistler Film Festival, and then we just went into our theatrical, because we just were like, this festival thing is not for our movie. And that, it was really hard for me, because I really, like, in my brain, that's what films do, is they do a festival run, and get awards at festivals, and you go to all these festivals. So that was really hard for me. But then we had such an amazing theatrical run that I was like, oh, okay, this is where our film is supposed to be. And not all Canadian films get the theatrical that we did. So
Well, just to talk about that for a second, and we are sort of
mhm.
nearing the end here. We don't want to take up all of your time, but as far as the theatrical, how did that come about? When did you get a distributor, or did you self-distribute? What did you do there?
Oh my gosh, don't self-distribute, that sounds exhausting. I don't know when we got our distributor, honestly, like, it's all kind of a blur, but no, we must have gotten them before Austin, because I remember telling them about Austin. So we signed with Vortex. Matt was great. Matt is so good, and he was just like, "We want your film, we love your film," and so that was really awesome. Actually, we met up with them at TIFF, so it must have been, like, in the summer, we must have signed with them. So that was really great, they were really supportive. And, one of the big things, and this is what I'll really focus on for anyone that's listening, is even when you get a distributor, you still have to do a lot of work. And the
Right.
reason that our film was successful is because of like the grassroots social media. I'll say Krista and I did, but like 90% of it was Krista. She was so on top of videos and messaging people and like getting people excited about it. And so, when we had our meeting with Vortex, and we really wanted to get in our theatrical before the deadline for the Canadian Screen Awards, forgetting that we're a West Coast film, so no one cares. But
Yeah.
just kidding. But I'm not. So
We're all West Coast, so this
yeah.
is this is the this hits deep.
Also, just for anybody listening, it's there's a thing about the West Coast and the East Coast, as Laura was saying, like if your film doesn't, if you can't see the CN Tower in your movie or TV show, it doesn't exist in
Mhm.
Canada, is the
Yeah.
general feeling. So whether you're in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, or in British
Yeah.
Columbia, there's Toronto and then there's everyone else.
Yeah. It's so funny. Just side note, I was at TIFF that year after, we didn't get in, but we went anyway to like, network and whatever. Someone said to me when I told him I was from Vancouver, he's like, "Oh, do you guys have a film industry there?" I was like, "Are you kidding me right now?"
Wow.
Anyway, so that's what that
Wow.
is. So when we got our distribution and we had our meetings, and so Cineplex put us in 2 theaters to start, Vancouver and Toronto. And I was a little bit disappointed about that, but because I thought, we would have more, but it actually worked out really well. The first thing that I would say is you have to go to the screenings, right? If you are a filmmaker, you have to get your butt on an airplane and you have to go to where your movie is screening. That is how you get people in the seats. So on opening weekend, I flew to Toronto. I did a in a red eye to Toronto, went to the screening on the Friday night, did a Q&A, had a little party after, emailed everyone I knew that lived in Toronto. Every single person I've ever known in my life, I emailed and was like, please come to my film. And it was great. We didn't have a full house, but we had a pretty full house. We did a Q&A. I had a thing that was great. Then I got on a plane like super early in the morning, flew back to Vancouver, went straight from the airport. I went into the bathroom at the airport, did my makeup with with our line producer, Nikki, who came with me to Toronto. We got in the car and drove to the Cineplex in Vancouver and did the Saturday night screenings in Vancouver. We sold out the 7 p.m. screening. We sold it out in like 5 minutes.
Amazing.
It was insane. I was, like, on there trying to, like, buy tickets for my cast, before, but it sold out so quickly, so that we decided to then try and get people to go to the 3:30 screening, and then we did a Q&A after the 3:30 screening with almost the entire cast except Jesse because he was on set, and then we did the Saturday night screening, and then and both of them sold out, which was crazy. And then it was just continually marketing and marketing and marketing. And we got held over in Toronto for 2 weeks. We got held over in Vancouver for 4 weeks. And
I
that
remember
doesn't
that.
happen out of like the goodness of Cineplex heart. Like that happens because it makes money. And that was really the our publicist as well, Nicola Pender. That woman is incredible, and that was a huge thing that we did. So, Vortex has an in-house publicist, but we really wanted to hire Nicola because she is great, and she was able to get us amazing press in the US and amazing press in Canada. One of the things, so after we did our Canadian run, and then after it was successful in Vancouver and Toronto, we also did the Grand Prairie run, which got held over for an extra week as well. So we did 2 weeks in Grand Prairie. We also had in Saskatchewan, in Regina, I think we were in a theater there. And then we really wanted to do a US theatrical. For me, having a film that opened in LA and New York was like, that was my dream. And so that we did ourselves. We have US distribution through Gravitas, but they are like, we're not going to do a theatrical. So we said, okay, we're going to figure it out ourselves. We talked to some different people, and then it was just very random. But my cousin, who was a co-producer on the film, she brought her friend to our movie. Her friend's sister is in the marketing department at Look Cinema, which is a chain in the US. She called her sister. She's like, "This movie's great. You guys should play it." We went and met with them. They're awesome. Look Cinema is incredible. If anyone's in the US, oh my God, it's like comfy chairs. They bring food to your, it's like Cineplex VIP.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so great. And so we really wanted LA and New York. And they're like, "Well, what about all these other cities?" I was like, "Great, let's do that." And so we opened in June in LA and New York. And again, we got our butts down. All of us went, not all of us, but Roger, Michelle, Bronwyn, and myself went to LA. Well, Kristen, David went to New York. And then so the Friday night we did our LA screening. Bronwyn and I got on another red eye to New York, and then we did a big screening in New York Saturday night, and both of those sold out, and it was crazy. It was wild.
That is phenomenal. That is so great to
That,
hear. Yeah, congratulations. Amazing.
Thank you. And that didn't cost us anything. That we actually made money. This is the only thing we've made money on is because we split the box office for our theatrical in the US. So we made some
that's
money off of
fantastic.
that.
Well, there's a bit of a mix of like of kind of going a little traditional, so to speak, but then a lot of hustle
Yeah.
on your guys' part, just to like you said, to fill the seats. If you're not doing that work yourself, it's not like
Yeah.
you've got billboards in LA or advertising on the Super Bowl or
Yeah.
anything like that. Like people have to hear about your film, and the only way to do
Yeah.
that is going to be through the people who made it.
Yeah, and no one's gonna care about it as much as you are. That's just
Right.
what it is, and so making sure that you have money for yourself as a filmmaker to fly to places, to go to the events, like, if you don't go to them, no one else is gonna be there. People love Q&As. People love to go to screenings with filmmakers, so, get your butt on the plane, get a good credit card with lots of, points.
Points.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been amazing. We're sort of at the end here, and yeah, just so much great information, Laura. Thank you so much for all of this.
Yeah.
And what an experience. And so, do you what are you working on right now? Are you thinking about your next feature? What's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually have a meeting with Telefilm tomorrow, speaking of. So my next feature, I actually am not writing. I'm working with a writer on this one, who I met through the Austin Film Festival, which is awesome. Her name's Catherine McKenzie. She's a novelist and she's an incredible writer. So that's really fun to be collaborating on that. So we're working towards that. And then I'm starting to write again a little bit my own stuff. I think having multiple things happening at once is always good. And then I'm really honestly trying to break into television. I want to direct TV because I still need
Yeah.
to pay for my movie.
And because as you said at the beginning, indie film doesn't pay well.
It does not. And I think I'll leave everyone with this. It's okay to make money. It's actually okay. It's okay to do your art and to also make money. You're not a sellout if you take a job within the industry that pays you a nice paycheck, because then it allows you to make your indie stuff. And that's the dream, right? Is to go work on these big studio projects and then to be able to make your own stuff as well, because your indie projects is where you get the creative control. Your big studio projects is where you get a nice big paycheck so that,
Yeah.
you don't starve. I'm 40 years old. I don't want to eat craft dinner. Like,
No.
I'm not interested in that. I like my nice things. I like to go shopping and I like to fly business class. These are the things that I like to do. So I think it's
And it's
really important.
because one way or another, you have to have money coming in somewhere,
Yeah.
right? So, are you gonna do that in a way where you're constantly like hand to mouth, like just like
Yeah.
paycheck in, paycheck out, or are you going to make it so that you can give yourself that freedom to be able to go, look, I just want to write something that I care about, or I
Yeah.
just want to make something I care about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great, thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thanks,
And
guys.
and and
Yeah.
before we wrap up, is there one piece of advice that you would give an independent filmmaker about to start their film, or somebody just starting out? What's one thing that you could share?
I think the most important thing is getting the right people around you, creating your team. I think without good people around you that you trust, you're going to be with these people for a very long time. I joke that I'll pay for Krista's children's therapy because I took their mother away from them for like 4 years of their life. But it's a long process, and so finding the right people and just it's fun. Like, have fun. And don't
Yeah.
forget, I think the biggest thing as well is enjoy the moment while it's happening. don't be worried so much about what's next or how it's going. It's because what's the point, right? You don't know how your film's going to go. So just like enjoy all the moments as they happen instead of worrying about what's going to happen next.
I love that.
On that note,
That's a
Laura,
great
thank
note.
you.
Thank you.
All right, so that was a really great discussion with Laura. There were so many pieces of information that were just pure gold for anyone that's thinking about tackling an indie feature right now. Anthony, what was your biggest takeaway from that talk?
There were so many takeaways. I had a hard time
Yeah.
thinking about which one I wanted to focus on. So I've got kind of three, but they all kind of center around one overall theme. And I mean, the first and foremost, most important one was when Laura said, you know, we picked a date and we picked a date to start filming and we just went and did it. And it was without having the funding in place. They had some of the cast ideas. They hadn't hired the crew or anything like that yet, but they just said, look, we're going to film at this time. Like, this is the date we're going to go to camera. And then they reverse engineered their plan from there. And it felt so intentional. Like, it's almost
Yeah.
like you kind of have to jump in with both feet. Back to our podcast theme of just working with what you have available. Laura's mom lives on Bowen Island. So she had that location basically there for her. Laura's an actor, so she has contact with some amazing British Columbia based actors that are known in their own right. So to be able to pull together an ensemble cast like that,
Who also had their own context, right? So that's how
who
she
have
got Jesse on board. And, he just brought so much to the film as
so
well.
much to the film as well. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that was the thing is like it's that idea that what she did was she took the things that she knew that she would be able to either figure out or knew she had right away and just put it together and said, okay, well, this is the film. And it wasn't just about though making that film because she had those resources. She knew the type of film she wanted to make. She really loves that big chill ensemble cast comedy drama, and that's the kind of movies that she likes to see.
Not just chasing the market or something like that, right? Where it's like, oh, make a horror movie because they're supposedly more successful, and then living with this for 2 years, even though you don't want to do it. So, like, the passion was really there. She wanted to tell this story. And that was very clear
Absolutely.
in the interview, obviously, and in the filmmaking itself.
Yeah, and she wasn't afraid to ask for what she didn't have. Like,
Yeah.
she said we took an American approach. They got turned down by telefilm. They got turned down by some festivals. They got turned down by things. So
Yeah.
like when they didn't get the telefilm money, they just said, "Look, we're just gonna have to go to people." And so she went to her network and expanded her network to Canadian entrepreneurs, and just said, "Look, we need money for a movie. Do you want to be a part of it?" That was it. And she wasn't afraid to ask. Wasn't afraid to ask for favors from crew. Getting a bunch of people to come together for a project like this is not easy, and so she just wasn't afraid to ask, wasn't afraid to say, look, I'm making this film, you can get on the train or not, but if you want to be part of it, be a part of it. What about you?
Well, for me, like, the thing that really stuck with me was more on the distribution side, and just how much work it took for them to promote the movie and make sure that they were still filling seats wherever they went, even though that, they still had a distributor. And that's why it's also just interesting to hear her thoughts on self or quote unquote active distribution versus going with a distributor and letting them handle all the booking of theaters and getting the movie across North America, right? It's still a ton of work, but it's also this good debate that's going on right now that I want to keep tracking as we get deeper and deeper into the world of indie film. But it's something you and I have talked about, distributor versus self-distribution. With the feature that we're mounting right now, we are focusing on active distribution ourselves and avoiding a distributor, unless of course like the deal was amazing and the MG turned out to be totally worth it. We're totally open to it, but typically that's not the case, right? Even though you have a distributor and you give away all of your rights to the movie essentially, and you still have to do all of this work anyway to promote it yourself and fill the seats. I'm like, well, why are we giving away our 30% cut to the distributor when we can hold on to that and our investors and filmmakers reap the rewards? So it's this really interesting debate, and I get why they went with a distributor. It totally made sense for them at the time.
She was really really wanting to do a theatrical in the
Yeah.
US, and it didn't make sense for her distributor to take that on because they just didn't see the value in putting their resources behind it. And so Laura and her team just said, "Okay, well, we'll do it."
Yeah.
And they connected with theaters in LA and in New York, and they just said, "We're going to do our own premieres in New York and
Which
in
was
LA."
great too,
So
because it was just using their network to even find that connection in the first place, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is great because and I think it really speaks. I know it's hard for filmmakers to start to think, "Oh gosh, you mean I have to be that person now? I have to be a theater booker, I have to be a marketer, I have to go out and sell." And it's like, "Well, yes, you're making, you're making a thing. It's got to be sold. You've got to get it in front of eyeballs. It has no value if you show it in a forest and nobody's there to watch it. It has no value."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, so I totally agree with everything that you mentioned that you took away. It's huge. Again, like I want to listen to this episode, this interview with her again because there's just gold everywhere. And then, yeah, as we continue the podcast and talking to people, I am interested to see where, what the distribution landscape continues to look like and how it
Mhm.
shifts 2025, 2026 with everything going on.
And it's important because you and I don't know how you feel. I just feel like I keep getting more questions than I get answers.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
absolutely.
more. I don't think anybody has a solution out there that is tried and true and works for everybody. I think that there are some successes that people have seen, and there are some people who maybe would have tried the exact same approach and haven't succeeded. And I think that it's important to keep figuring out like what are the commonalities to the ones that do well.
Yeah, and on that note, there is no one right way to do this, right? It is different for every single film. And so if you think that your path is going to emulate someone else's path, you're wrong. It's just not going. It depends on when your movie gets finished, on which festivals you hit first. Like there's millions of variables that go into this. So just do your best to prepare for it, do as much research as possible and hit the road, pound the pavement and take it one day at a time because you could win the lottery or you could get the big payout later down the road. But it's going to be a lot of work no matter what you do.
It sounds like it's more about control your inputs. The results are hard to foresee, but the inputs are. So the work that you put into all of this is what will matter. As long as you're not going to be discouraged by if the results aren't there right away or they aren't there long term, but if you put in the work and keep learning, keep iterating, keep trying to up new approaches, the results will come, but they might not come in the way that you expect them to.
And speaking of new approaches, it's probably time to give a shout out to some of our indie crowdfunding campaigns that got our attention this week. So,
Yes.
my pick this week is a short film called Dear Dad. It was a deeply personal short film written by Bethany Curtis and based in Portsmouth, UK. It's inspired by real life experiences. It tells the story of Mark, a recently divorced father struggling to rebuild his life while being emotionally and financially drained by a toxic separation. Through a mix of raw memories and a glimmer of hope, we see him fight to hold on to what truly matters, his children. Divorce is never easy, but the mental health struggles of fathers in these situations are rarely talked about, and Dear Dad aims to change that, shining a light on the emotional toll, the isolation, and the resilience it takes to push forward. It's a story that's not just about one man, but about countless fathers who have been through the same fight to stay present in their children's lives. Right now, the filmmakers are crowdfunding to raise £4,000, roughly $7,000 Canadian, to bring this story to life, covering essential costs like casting, locations, and post production. Even a small contribution makes a difference, and they're offering some really great perks, including early access to the film, producer credits, and an invite to the premiere in Portsmouth. So, if this story resonates with you, or if you just want to support powerful independent filmmaking, check out the link in our show notes. How about you, Anthony?
My pick this week is Hey There, Mr. Moon, and this is a Canadian project on Seed and Spark. The team is from Victoria, British Columbia. The story is in a near future where Earth has become uninhabitable, survivors drift through space in small, corporate sold happy pods, promised safe passage to a new habitable planet. As they await their uncertain arrival after a year of isolation, the passengers, lovers, siblings, and strangers grapple with hope, connection, and the truth behind their fate. And why I'm picking this, it's actually a podcast. It's a podcast series that this team from Victoria, the lead producer
Cool.
is Naomi Duska. I think we're talking about a lot of short films and feature films and so on, but something I remember reading when I was first looking at projects like Jim Cummings' Thunder Road and how he turned a short film into a feature film through crowdfunding and all those other avenues was that what he actually did as part of his pitch for the feature film was he recorded his entire script as a podcast. So he would sit in his closet and basically just read out all the dialogue, the action lines, and create like what one of those radio plays from it. And then he went into his
Yeah.
editing software and added sound effects and music and everything like that. And that became how he would pitch the project. This is a theater team from Victoria who have created this story that's a quite ambitious story. But what they're doing is, I think, in creating the series, is they're developing an intellectual property element that could have much bigger opportunities after just this radio podcast. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to support it, as just a way of saying of showing that there are different ways to get the word out and to get the film ready, or the idea you have in your head out to people, because this podcast could turn into a TV series, it could turn into a movie,
Which
who
is pretty
knows.
common now. I mean, there's a company comes to mind, Q Code. They have a bunch of dramatic podcasts with like A-list talent, Oscar winners that it's sort of an incubator in a way. They take these dramatic podcast episodes and then they are developing them into features and TV shows. So it's totally within the realm that this group could make this podcast and then turn it into a television series or a feature down the road.
And so they're right now up just over 60% of their funding is raised. They've got, as of the release of this recording, they'll have about 12 days left, I think, until their crowdfunding campaign ends. And we'll have a link in the show notes for how you can go and check out Hey There, Mr. Moon.
Very cool. Okay, well, that's it for this week's episode of Off the Lot. We do want to hear from you. Please, if there are any topics you want covered or any questions you would like answered, email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. Our handles are in the show notes. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Give us a rating. We'll see you next week. See you, Anthony.
Have a great week, Ken.